Welcome to this episode of the Doug Sanquist podcast. Where interested is interesting, and interesting people share their stories and build their biographies along the way. I'm your host, Doug Sanquist. I'm a dentist and a photographer, and now a podcast host. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Doug Sanquist, and on Facebook at Doug Sanquist Photo. And you can join our email list by going to DougSanquistPodcast.com. Today's guest is Reese Spykerman. Hi, Reese. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. I'm so glad to sit down and talk with you. It's been a few years since we actually had another conversation.
I know, right? As with all of our guests, I don't have a bio, and I haven't read Reese's bio, but I will tell you that I met Reese about 15 years ago, I want to say. I hired Reese to build a website for a friend of mine. Don't know how well that all worked out, but Reese is a fantastic designer, and she does a great job building websites. She really understands how to tell stories and how to do that graphically. And so I know how she's able to do that really, really well, but that is not the goal of our podcast. Our goal of the podcast today is to discover Reese's real biography. You okay with that?
I am. It sounds intriguing, like something we would watch. I don't watch cable, but on like Entertainment Tonight, the real biography behind XYZ person.
I know, right? And
yes.
So I always start with a list of 10 quick and easy questions. And so there's no maybes here, only yes, no, or pick one. So they're all silly, but they're kind of interesting to kind of hear where people land. So question number 1 is gummy bears or M&Ms?
M&Ms, but gummies back when I was 20.
Okay, I like that. Sweet or salty?
Sweet.
Hot or cold?
Hot. Well, I really can't maybe?
No, you can't maybe.
I hate both. But I guess I would rather be warm than cold.
Okay, all right. And you live in Michigan. Go figure, right?
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah. And would you ever wear flip-flops to Disney World?
No.
That's good.
Hello, roller coaster, flip-flop, flying.
I know.
Not a good combo.
Plus, you also walk like 7 miles a day when you're there, because I can't imagine walking 7 miles in flip-flops, but people do.
Poor foot. Poor foot, yeah.
Are you an early riser or a night owl?
Early riser.
Cow or chicken?
Cow.
All right. Short hair or long hair?
Long.
Okay. Tattoos, yay or nay?
Nope.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Cake or pie?
Ooh. So there was this show that had a pie cake, and I think they called it a cake. So see, people could pick both. But anyway, gonna go for cake.
Okay, all right. And the bonus question is sauerkraut, love it or hate it?
Depends. I've had some really, I know, I'm not following your rules. I've had really amazing sauerkraut. I don't hate it, but I could do without it unless it's amazing.
Okay. So if it's really good, love it. We'll go with that. All right.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So Reese, where were you born?
I was born in Traverse City, Michigan.
And you're still living there today. Is that right?
Well, yes, after a whirlwind tour across the United States, Canada, and Malaysia, I am back here today, and I've been back for about 5 years, I think.
Okay, we'll get to the Malaysia part sometime.
Okay.
Because by the way, that's where when I hired Reese like 15 years ago, she was living in Malaysia, and I had no idea. So that was an interesting learning experience at that time for all of us, I think. So what was your earliest childhood memory?
I remember my mom carrying me on her hip down the stairs of our apartment because the apartment was on fire. I think the dishwasher or the oven, something, I can't remember what, caught on fire. And it's my earliest memory because, there was a panic. It was, I might have been about 4. This is my best guess. It was a big deal. And I have to tell you, until about my late teens, I was really scared of fire.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. So what happened after that? Do you remember what happened after that? Did you have to move out, or did you have to like what was the circumstances around that after that you remember? I know it's pretty young, but.
So my memory is kind of what I'm piecing together more from what my mom and dad told me afterward. But I think that particular fire, wait for this one, wasn't as bad, and we were able to move back in. And then a year or two later, we moved into our home. But that building that we were in was owned by my uncle, and it caught fire big time when I was 10. And I remember standing outside on the street, and in our downtown, it's not, a large city, and it was maybe 4 or 5 stories tall, and this huge building, with flames going up all over the place. And I remember thinking we used to live there, and that poor building went through like at least 2 or 3 different fires. The one that affected my family, I don't know if we were temporarily out of a home for a little while and lived with someone else. I really don't. I need to ask my mom. But I do think we were able to move back for another year or 2 before they got their house.
That's interesting. So the building actually ended up burning down almost all the way at the end, or having significant problems even after that, right?
It did, yeah. And it's this building that's an old historic building in the town. So it burned down, and that would be about 30 years ago now. It didn't burn down completely, but significantly. And they rebuilt it, and it's still standing today. I drive by it, and I'm like, yeah that place, it had a fire. It had 15-foot ceilings, but it's still standing.
Still there, yeah. That's cool. It's amazing those moments that you remember from way back when that just kind of sit there, huh? They don't really, like, you have a good memory of them, but then certain details get fuzzy. It's interesting how our brains work that way,
Yeah, I like to call it, I have a memory of a memory. Mm-hmm. And what it feels like when we're talking about the really early childhood memories, it doesn't feel like my memory. Like I have ownership over that memory. It's more like the story has been told so many times in my mind that I know it's probably true or somewhat in the frame of truth, but it's not like this direct memory. Like yesterday, I remember taking out the trash, right? It's so much more distant.
Right. And then you also, the further away you get from it, it becomes, was that my memory or was it the memory that my mom told me, and so then you kind of mix those things together, which is it's interesting how our brains work. And it probably comes back to why eyewitnesses are bad witnesses and all that kind of stuff, because our memories get changed by so many different things. It's an interesting thought process to kind of go through. So what were your summers like as a kid?
I remember playing outside a lot on my bike, and I had I had a scooter. So this is the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. And there was a time period where scooters became kind of hot. And I loved my scooter, and I would go pedal down the street with my scooter, play with some kids down, a few houses down. I remember there was this game, I think, called Bloody Murder, and I don't remember the details very much, but someone has to hide, and then you're given this count, and then someone screams bloody murder, and you go try to find the person who's hiding. And that's what I remember about my summers, in addition to my mom and dad taking me to the beach a lot, because where I live is right on the water.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's, a lot of summertime, especially you get the warm summers in Michigan. You want to try to find a few weeks of warmth, right?
Yeah, and I think you want to be outdoors as much as you can. I mean, whenever there's a glimmer of sunlight here, I'm kind of like, oh, I got to go get that before it's gone.
Yeah, for sure. So what was your first job growing up? Do you remember that?
Well, my first job was when I was 14, and I worked at a department store for some extra cash. And I think I just, I helped women find their clothing, or sometimes I would ring up, the totals. So there was a department store in our downtown, and that's where I worked.
Wow, that's cool. So did you work through high school and stuff like that, or?
I worked through that for a couple years, and then when that was early on, I might have been about 14, and then as high school got on, and I was 16 and 17, I was too busy with academics and extracurriculars. But what I would do is I'd work in the summer, and one of my summer jobs was between high school and college. I worked at a golf course and on the beverage cart.
Mm-hmm.
And they had like, the golf course had a little, like a food stand, right? Like on the 9th hole, something like that. So I worked there, and let me tell you, I think I made more money there than I do now. The tips were crazy.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Golfers were, the cart girl. I mean, I know it's probably the, not politically correct thing to say, but I mean, the cart girls do really, really well on golf courses typically, even today,
Yeah. Don't even get me. I mean, that could be a whole conversation. And I have to tell you, I think I was tipped well because I was a 17 or 18-year-old young woman. And, upon reflection, there's all kinds of issues and problems with that, but that's the story. I did work there, and I made good cash while doing it.
Yeah. Right. I mean, we're not going to, I'm trying to keep politics out of my podcast, because this is just about.
Oh man, you just open so many minefields when you go down there. Okay.
I know. Yeah. So, obviously you said academics in high school. So was like college, was that like a big thing growing up? Where was that was that instilled in you to go to college, or was that like a peer group, or was it like family saying you need to go to college? I mean, was that something that was like part of your path?
Absolutely. I remember, in my probably early teens, my parents made it really clear that because neither of them had gone to college, it was really important to them that I do. Mm-hmm. And so it was a given, that some things that are just a given. And here's the funny story. I don't know what was going through my mind when I was like 16 or 17, but there was a moment when I thought, okay, I'll tell you what was going through my mind. I'm an only child, and I was feeling guilty about how much it might cost my parents to send me to college. So I thought, well, I'm going to go talk with the Army Navy recruiter. Mm-hmm. And, look at that as a potential career path. And I'm not here to knock it or anything, but really it would not have been the right path for me, just mm-hmm. how I am as a person. And my mom, she rolled with it. She knew that the best way to talk me out of this was not to talk me out of it, but to let me go to the Army Navy office. And there were a bunch of middle-aged dudes kind of smoking, and I felt really uncomfortable and out of place there. And that alone, I think she knew would do it for me when I got exposed to that environment. And she said, that's what it would probably be like a lot, like every day. People who are not as delicate and sensitive as you are, Reese. Mm-hmm. And that did it for me. But college was an absolute. I was going to be going to college.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how did you pick your, so college was there, and then how did you end up picking like what you were going to do and your path to study in college? Did you know that pretty much going to college, or did you figure that out after you got in?
I had a bit of a struggle on my hands my senior year. I had two clear paths before me, and it was challenging for me to know which to choose. So one path was to go to where I ended up going, the Missouri School of Journalism for journalism. The other path was to go to a university called St. Mary's, which is Notre Dame's sister school. And if I had gone there, it would have been for like writing and maybe a double major in singing. And I loved St. Mary's. I remember when I went on tour to that school, I just fell in love with it. And it was this challenging decision between my heart and my head. Mm-hmm. And I ended up deciding to go to Missouri for journalism school. I guess at that time, I don't know what was the overriding deciding factor. St. Mary's even gave me scholarship money, and Missouri didn't. I have to say, part of me wonders if it was I wanted to get a little further away from my hometown. Mm-hmm. I've always had this wanderlust mm-hmm. to see different parts of the world and to not be confined by a small town. And I think that may have been what pushed it over the edge and took me to Missouri, because that was further away than St. Mary's.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that you, it's like almost two different paths of like study at each different school. Now it's, do you wish you had kind of chosen the other path sometimes, even if it was a different school? I mean, was that I'll get to regrets eventually, but I'm just kind of, I guess we can talk about them now, but you ever regret that?
I don't know if I'd say regret is the word. It's more like I sit and I muse about how my life's paths would have kind of unwound if I had gone that route. And there's a part of me that feels like I missed out. And I have a feeling if I had gone to St. Mary's, I would probably be saying the same thing about not going to the University of Missouri. So every decision I have made is part and parcel of who I am now and where I am now. And I'm okay with that. But part of me wishes that we could walk two paths similarly in life. Like I could go back and re-experience my life, you know, from 16 or 18 on down this alternative path just to see where it would lead.
Yeah, that would be an interesting thought bubble, huh? Because I mean, you know, I think all of us look at decisions that, you know, we sit a certain time period and you have a decision in front of you and you're kind of like, okay, I can go right or I can go left, and you pick one, and then you just, you know, you wonder what happens if you'd gone left. And then
especially with those bigger life decisions, right?
Right, for sure. Yeah. So you went to school of journalism. So how does going to a school of journalism end up being like a, you know, graphic designer and like, you know, it's all journalism, I understand, but I mean, it's not like you're writing a newspaper headlines, you know? So how do you end up there?
Yeah.
You know? Well, did you ever get a job as a journalist? Did you ever get a job as a journalist at a school?
So before we're going to dial it back a bit to just before. So in high school, I was on the school paper. I was one of the editors. And one of the things I loved to do in addition to editing was do layouts of the paper. And I always thought that we could be doing more with our layouts, more interesting things. So early on, this is, you know, age 17, 16, something like that, there was this interest in design. Even though I have to tell you, I am a horrible artist. I can't draw to save my life. And I'm not a great photographer either. But something about layout interested me. And I went to journalism school. And while I was in journalism school, you have to do time at the local community paper. So I had a bunch of clips from my time there. I also, in my summers, would work for my local newspaper. So I did do some media work. But I got out and I was burned out. And I didn't want to work in a newsroom. I didn't like the environment. And so my first job out of school was editing for an independent book publisher. And after that job, I had another job, but I basically decided, you know what? This being employed thing is not for me. Like I just, not that I didn't want to, you know, make money and do something productive with my life, but I really hated being chained to a desk and beholden to my employer and all the things that you hear about, like on a show like The Office, and just the stupidity and the bureaucracy and the politics. I didn't like any of that. Right. And so I got let go from my second job after school. I had moved from Michigan to Florida for it. And after I had been there about, 4 or 5 months, they let me go. And I was stuck in Florida with no one else that I really knew. And I used that time to pivot to design work slowly. And I just kind of started dipping my toes in it. This is a few years before you and I met, Doug.
Right. Yeah.
And what I do today is I actually do both. I do the writing and the design. I do a lot of copywriting these days, and I've started doing that in the past couple of years. And I love to write. So that lets me still bring back that part of my background.
Right. Yeah, that's cool. So so then you started, after you got let go, then you just kind of started to pivot to doing your own thing and just starting to build up clients, a few clients here, a few clients there, and starting to get a little bit of a name, right? And that's been almost 20 years now, right?
Yeah, that's right. And when I first started out designing for other people, and this is shortly before you and I crossed paths, what I did and how I kind of made my mark is I did blog designs for people for free. And I did them to sort of make a name for myself and get some exposure and just have a bit of a portfolio built up. And from there, people started, like small businesses started asking me, well, will you do my website? And I was able to begin charging for it slowly.
And then one thing leads to another, and here you go. You have built a nice little career for yourself,
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Yeah. And it keeps pivoting, I'm sure. I mean, I think that's the thing with any career. It's like at some point you have to keep reinventing yourself on some level, which going from the blog designer to copywriter is a different pivot, that you weren't doing 15 or 20 years ago. Right? As much.
Yes. And
right.
No, I had kind of put the stop to all writing for a while, even though it was in my skill set. And I don't know why it didn't occur to me to try and bring that in as part of my skill set. So now what I do now, instead of just like delivering a design like I did for you, I instead like to focus on, all right, well, how do you make your design and writing compelling enough so that someone wants to buy from you off your website? And so I think it's been kind of a progressive path to that point. And I saw the writing on the wall a few years ago when the market became very saturated with not only designers, but a lot of options for people to do websites on their own really easily. And I knew I needed to kind of change my own positioning and offerings. And so that's what I did. And I think that's the heart of any entrepreneur. And maybe I'm curious what you think too, is our ability to adapt, to change as market forces change, as things around us change, as we grow older. Our ability to change and pivot is part of what makes or breaks for success.
Yeah, I don't think, well, just go back to the websites. I mean, 15 years ago, we had no social media. So if you didn't build a compelling website that actually, back then, you had to keep people on your website. You wanted people to actually, page views were a big thing. This is not really the point of my podcast, but 15 years ago, you wanted somebody to land on your website and you wanted them to spend a number of minutes on your site, not seconds. And today, you just want them to spend a few seconds on one page. And it's a completely different mindset. You want them to land on your sales page to buy whatever you're selling. You don't really want them. The goal is not to get them to look around your site as much as it is to actually find what they're going to want and buy it. Because I think that's where we're at today with social media and all this stuff, and it's a different pivot than what it was a long time ago, because we don't need to build these huge, big monstrosity websites. You're pretty much just building for a product. And I think that's the difference, right? In some way.
It is. And I think what's interesting and what I like about what I do is looking at the way our behavior changes even year to year. Like, for example, we were not nearly as much on our phones 5 or 7 years ago as we are now, in terms of, what we do with them and the sites we go to. And aside from how it applies to my work, I just find how human behavior is changing really interesting. Like, that's the part of what I do that I love the most. Like, you brought it up really well. How we behaved and engaged with websites 10 or 20 years ago is vastly different than the way we do today. And that interests me. It intrigues me about people.
Right. Well, my real job is as a dentist, and I think people don't really understand how that has changed and how that will dramatically change in the next coming weeks. Yes. It'll be far different when you go back to the dentist than it was the last time you were there. We will have to adapt to new ways that we have never, we will adapt. We've always adapted. Dentists are the kings of the infection control world. We know how to do this stuff better than any other healthcare professional out there. So if you're going to be safe, it's at a dentist's office. It's not at any other place. I firmly believe that. Even the worst dentist offices are probably better than most other hospitals at this point. So
I feel like that's a whole separate conversation that you and I could have that would be really interesting when we just think about what is going on in our world right now and all these rapid changes and how businesses will adapt, how people will adapt. This is the stuff that wakes me up at 2:00 in the morning.
Right. Well, for instance, you think back to the website idea, right? Everybody is on a Zoom call or a Google Meeting call. And at some point, when does real-time video sales happen on a website? Like, literally you pop into a chat and a person talking to you. That is probably not far around the corner. When you start thinking about it, you land on a website, instead of that little chat window that pops up and says, talk to us, you could actually get a real life person saying, hello, how are you today? It sounds a little bit creepy, but we're probably not that far from that.
Ooh, I actually really like that idea. Like, you give me, I like talking with you because you always bring up interesting ideas that I hadn't considered. I love that.
Right. Just think about it. That's definitely a way that people will probably connect in different ways that we hadn't ever thought about before, or, a Zoom sales call or a Zoom, I don't know. I mean, we've had them before, but they're going to change. They're going to be different, and they're going to be more accepted coming forward. I mean, the way video is handled now. I mean, less in-person conversations will definitely take place. It's just, I think you're right. I mean, change for change is dumb, but change to keep move this in the right direction is something that we all have to deal with. And if we're not doing it, we're going to fail.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. That's cool. We could probably go down lots of little rabbit holes there, but, So let's, what do you do for fun? What do you do outside of work?
I hate that question so much because I'm a workaholic. I mean, just
you work
hand
all
in
the
the
time?
air. Yeah, I do. I love
the fact I love people who actually love their work so much that they just they just do it just because. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, I eat, sleep, and breathe this business. And it's ingrained in me. However, on the occasion where I'm willing to put it aside, and I have to, because I have some health issues that require me to. In the summers in particular, my husband and I like to go and chill out by Lake Michigan. We'll go drive maybe 30, 45 minutes away, set up our little tent, and just sit on the beach for a couple hours. And for me, fun is not so much about like a lot of stimulation. It's more, how can I relax? How can I wind down? Anything that puts me in nature, whether it's like a hike or, we'll travel sometimes just to be able to go be by the water or be by mountains. Those are the things that really light me up outside of my work.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I mean, that's pretty much why I do photography. I mean, when I'm out, in the middle of nowhere waiting for the sun to come up, I mean, it has to be in silence. If people are playing music, I literally will tell them to turn it off. They pretty much will. It's a pretty much a known thing that if you play music out loud without earbuds and I'm out there, I will tell you to turn it off.
Oh, good. I'm glad you do that. Thank you for all of us.
Because to me, it's my time, and that's, it's moments. If you want to put headphones in, but I don't want to hear it, So it's just interesting. It's a little quirky thing how some of us relax different ways, and I think you have to find out how you relax well, and I think that's part of life.
Agreed. And you mentioned moments, and I think, as an aside, one of the things I've really enjoyed about your photos when I see them is they make me feel like I'm there at that. Like, I'm thinking in particular of some of your photos from Japan where I've been.
Yep.
And they take me there in that moment, and I'll just sit and I'll look at your photo for a minute, and it's not the same as going out in nature, but it's like a bridge to get my mind there. And that's one of the reasons I really appreciate your photos is they take me somewhere else outside of like this really technologically fueled world. And they take me, to a place that's more relaxing in nature. Right.
I think that, thank you for that. I think that's one of the attempts that's something that I attempt to do. Is
you succeed at it, Doug.
Photography is it's fun for me. It's fun because I can able to go to these places and bring them back to people. And that's what's fun for me,
as someone who's a copywriter, I got to say, you need to save that line and put it somewhere. I go to these places and I bring them back for other people, like something along those lines. I think that that's a really true and clear piece of writing that you could reuse. Don't mean to give you copywriting advice, but I have to mention it before I forget.
I love that. Yes, I will write that down for sure. When the recording comes up, I'll write that down.
Please do, because it describes your work so well and who you are as a person.
Right. And I think that's because really, having photography as your art is it's almost like cheating a little bit because anybody can do it. You just have to have the desire to go do it. It's not like writing or playing the piano or doing clay. If you're a sculptor, right? That takes years and years and years of like talent to do that. I could give you a camera and take you out to a few places at the right time in the right spot, put the tripod out there, tell you the settings, tell you to hit the button, and you could get a photo that I could take.
I can agree with you somewhat, but I do think you have an eye, and that good photographers have an eye, for one. And for two, I've seen your photos over the years. I've seen you evolve, and I remember you from the beginning when you were first dabbling in photography. Right. That didn't happen overnight.
That's true. I mean, yeah, we definitely grow. You're right.
You need to give yourself a little credit here.
Okay, will do. All right.
Okay, good.
So what's your greatest success?
Oh, gosh. I have a hard time with success. I don't know. You know, like you and I had a conversation before we started recording about how do you define success. And I think for me, one of my successes is living in another country for 7 years. And it had its ups and downs. It was hard a lot of times. And I came out on the other side of it okay. I came out of it a different person with my perspective changed. And there's people who think that and who live in other countries and it's no big deal. For someone like me, I found it's like I had a lot of culture shock. So the fact that I navigated that and continued to run a successful business and still thrived in this other country is, I would say, one of my bigger successes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how did you end up moving to Malaysia for 7 years? How did that end up?
My husband is from Malaysia, but we met before that. And
he went to school here. Is that right?
No, he has his own long winding road of a biography. But basically, we lived in Canada for a few years and then decided to move to Malaysia. And, you know, there were a few different reasons why, you know, see and experience a new culture. He gets to be closer to his family. I thought wrongly that we might take advantage of like a lower cost of living, but that didn't end up being quite the case. So all those reasons combined, we're like, well, let's go to Malaysia and see how we do there. And that's kind of like the condensed version of how we ended up there.
Well, that's cool. And so you spent 7 years there though, right?
Yes.
That's not
like
just
seven and a half.
That's not just like, you know, a year and I got to go home. You know, that's a fairly significant big chunk, I think. You know,
it's like a huge, it's about like, what, 25% of my life, you know?
Yeah. And I think what's interesting is that, you know, I think you're willing to say that, you know, it was great and it was also had its pitfalls because I think, well, I'm going to make a terrible generalization, but a lot of times people will say those things and they say it was the best time of my life and I would have, you know, it was just fantastic. And it's like, it's refreshing to hear you say that, you know, yeah, it was hard too. I mean, it was like, you know, there was pluses and minuses to it, which I think is pretty cool.
Oh yeah. People sometimes package things so that we only hear about the glossy, shiny stuff. And I understand why, as someone who's in marketing, I get that. But the truth of the matter is there were a lot of ups and downs for me in Malaysia. It was really hard sometimes, but I don't regret it. It was a very important time in my life for giving me the perspective on the world and people that I have now.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, you know, it's changed a lot even since you left, I'm sure. But I mean, you know, it's still, you know, it's a definite different place than growing up in America, right? With all of its, you know, it's just different. I mean, whether you can say it's third world or not, it's not, but it's, you know, it's definitely different.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I did as an American, and I think a lot of people would probably tend to do the same, is I was so narrowly focused in my own experience, it didn't occur to me when, you know, we made the decision to move there, how vastly different a culture can be than what you're used to. Because I think Americans in particular, a lot of times, because of things like Hollywood and what we watch and see on TV, we kind of think that that's the way the world is.
Right.
And it's not. And what's really interesting to me about parts of Asia, so Malaysia in particular, is how rapidly things change and grow and develop compared to what we are used to here in America. If I go 2 years, say, between my visits to Malaysia, it's almost like going to an entirely different country. I mean, culturally speaking, it hasn't really evolved much. A lot of those like cultural norms are still in place, but there's malls like up and down and highways that are gone and now they're there. Like it's just amazing to me how fast they will develop things and how fast they develop and change, and it's definitely not a third world country in that sense.
No. And I think what's amazing is the rapid growth of the middle class in those countries. That is you can't really quantify it unless you've been there and seen it. I mean, just, for instance, like on an earlier podcast, one of my friends, he lives in Vietnam right now, and he lives in Haiphong, Vietnam. They built a car factory in 21 months on the seafloor.
Yeah.
Like a factory to build cars in 21 months.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, just stuff just gets done so much more rapidly. And, again, there could be a whole conversation about pros and cons of that, because there's both.
There's both, yeah.
It's one of the really weird things about sometimes other countries, especially Southeast Asian ones, is the amount of stimulation is just off the charts. There's just so much going on. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's like it's the best way I think you can describe it is like that photo of that one street, that one corner in Tokyo, like at night with like, thousands of people crossing it, that I can't remember what the crossing was, but it's like, that's the idea that you get of Asia, it's like just masses of people moving all the time.
Yes, exactly.
All right, cool. I mean, we did talk about do you have any other regrets other than not going to St. Mary's College? Which really isn't a regret. It's just a different path, Right.
I do not. And I say that as someone who is a chronic worrier, has constant anxiety. That's kind of my state of being. I often question myself, like, was this the right call to make? Was this the right decision? It's part of my nature. I've accepted it. But I don't look back on my life and have this, well, I should have done this instead. I get nostalgic and melancholy about things that might have been, but no real regrets. Because again, This is who I am now. So everything I decided up until this point is like, I'm the accumulation of that, and I need to accept that and be okay with it.
Yeah. I think, regret is an interesting word. I mean, I think all of us have things that we can look back on and say, I probably could have made it a little different decision that way, or could have done it a different way that way, or a different decision. But I think at the end of the day, the sooner you can get to realize that you only have one life to live and this is it. So let's just try to make good decisions as we go forward. And then regrets kind of don't really matter at that point, because then it doesn't matter at that point. It's not worth regretting about. Kind of how I think about it.
Yeah. And I think my husband has helped me a lot with this in helping me see, like, when you make a decision, if you made a decision in the past, you need to trust that you made it with the available data you had and with as best you could. And I think not having regrets in life ultimately comes down to trusting yourself. And even if something could have gone differently, even if, I've heard of a lot of people right now, because of the coronavirus, are feeling things like guilt and regret because, maybe they shouldn't have put money into that thing. Maybe they shouldn't have bought that new car. But I want to say to anyone listening and feeling that, we don't have any way of knowing what's coming down the pipe. So part of trusting yourself is knowing that you make the best decisions you can with the information you have at hand. And if you really do feel like you're not making the best decisions with the information you have at hand, well, that's something you can change going forward. But you can't change what you've already done.
Yeah. I mean, I love that thought. I mean, I think so many times we beat ourselves up because we made the wrong decision. It's like, well, we made the decision with the best, knowing what we knew at that time was to be the best decision to go. And I think part of that too, another layer on top of that, is just learning how to trust your own sense making abilities. And then how do you become comfortable enough to be able to trust yourself? And I think in the world of social media and the world of the way the world is right now, it becomes difficult to actually believe that you can actually make the best decision. Because for so many of us, it's like, well, I wonder what this person thinks, or I wonder what that person thinks, or I wonder if let me run this decision by so-and-so just to see if they have a better decision. And I think sometimes we just don't trust ourselves enough at some point,
Well, and I would argue the system's built that way because people want us to not trust ourselves so that we in turn turn to them. And we think if we pay them some money for something, that they will provide the answer for us. And I want to be clear, I'm not talking about cases like clearly I need to pay you as a dentist money because I don't trust myself with my own damn teeth. And that's probably a pretty good idea.
Right.
But when we're talking about, should I make this decision or not? Yeah, I think we all could do with trusting ourselves a bit more about those kind of things. And here's something that I heard once and I loved. Don't hold your 20-year-old self or your 30-year-old self to the knowledge and standards and experience that your today's self has. Because that's just not fair to former you.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, all of us have a path that we've gone on, and we've all, we have, there's a reason that we have age on our side.
No, that's the really beautiful thing about getting older, at least for me, is that I just feel more assured. I am who I am, and I'm good with that.
That's okay with that, yeah. So what's your greatest fear?
So I have mindset blocks around money. And probably one of my deepest fears is around money. And it's just that something's going to happen. We will get wiped out. There'll be a horrible medical problem, which is not an irrational fear in the United States. And, we'll be living hand to foot, or something will happen to me physically, and there won't be enough money, and I won't be able to bring in my income anymore. And honestly, the fear itself, when I sit and I pick it apart, there's really little ground for it to stand on, but it remains in me as like this deep-seated fear. And it comes from way back in my childhood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's a common one. I think that's a common, I hear that a lot. I think the coronavirus is going to help a lot of that, because I think at the end of the day, we're all going to figure it out somehow. I mean,
I have to tell you, the first few weeks after things really got heated up here in these states with the coronavirus, I, like many people, was really not sleeping well. And part of it, was things like worry about my business. Like, how will this affect my business? And I think people have that worry on some level or another. And I've tried really hard to turn that around. And I don't want to say everyone should be doing this, because this is hard to do. And if you're still feeling fear, it makes sense. But I've tried to think, all right, well, what action can I take instead, so that I get out of fear mode and at least try to be in a more productive and constructive mode. Mm-hmm. Whether it works or not remains to be seen. Yeah. But that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, and I think the reality is there are new opportunities that will come out of this that we have never even thought about before. And so how do we put ourselves in a position knowing that change is a constant and we have to step into that change, knowing that, and how do we take the fear and of the unknown and say, okay, there will always be uncertain times, and we have to accept that. And so how do we then take that and actually step into the new opportunities that are ready for us to step into? Because there are going to be opportunities that are waiting for us, and we just have to be willing to step into them. They'll be far different. And I think if we can turn that fear into whatever those new opportunities are, then we've just rolled right into the next phase.
Yeah, I agree.
Easier said than done. But.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Because there's a lot of fear there. I mean, I haven't worked in 6 weeks. And so that's the first time in my life I haven't worked in 6 weeks. So
huge. Like,
there's
the effect on your life and the butterfly effect is massive.
Right. Yeah. And so there's at the time of recording this, I don't really know. There's no time frame when I'm going to start. So just accept it, I guess. Right. That's all we can do.
Podcast.
That's right. So what would your current self say to your young self?
Okay. My current self would tell my young self that she's absolutely okay the way she is, and she does not need the acceptance of her peers, and she should not go seeking that. And the fact that she's a little sensitive and different than other children is a gift that is going to serve her extraordinarily well as an adult. And if she can weather this storm as hard as it is, she's going to be fine, and that I've got her back. Because I, as a little kid, from a young age and even into my teens, I've talked about this on another podcast, I was bullied like terribly. I just didn't do well at all in school. And so I would love for that younger me to have some more resilience and to let stuff roll off her and to not care so much whether she's accepted or not by peers. And again, when we say easier said than done, I think that's easier said than done for any kid. But I would love her to feel okay about her weirdness and who she is.
Yeah, I think I wish society would allow us to just be who we are a little bit more. I mean, I think it's tough. I think it's tough even being a kid now. I mean, I can't imagine it being any easier than when we were little kids. I mean, sure, the bullying still happens. It just happens in different levels now.
I think it's probably worse. Like, I would not want to be a teenager dealing with social media right now.
Right. I mean, it's got to be, I mean, as I have two kids who are almost teenagers now. I mean, I've decided how I'm going to try to handle it. And I mean, I don't know if I'll let you know in a few years whether it was the best way to go. I don't know, but I'm not a parent who believes that you have to. I feel like you need to face it head on, and I think they should know what social media is, and they should be able to. If you keep it from them, I could be wrong on this, but if you keep it from them, then they'll find it anyways. I'd rather have them on it. I'd rather have them be monitoring it. I'd rather have us know what's going on so that we can actually help to protect them as well as we possibly can, because it's not going away. That's just kind of where I'm at with it. But I agree with you completely. It's an issue. I don't really know what the best answer is for it, but I think more in the open is better than less in the open, than hidden. That's just kind of where I'm at. But
yeah, I think
I could be proven wrong.
I agree with you. Like, I'm seeing this situation where if you can foster a relationship with your kids where you're just talking about this normally, it's not like the big talk that happens once a quarter and everyone's feeling all anxious about it. And it just becomes a part of your day-to-day conversation. And what's going on with them in social media, and they feel comfortable telling you about what's going on with that in their life as much as possible. I think if I were a parent, that's probably the way I'd approach it too.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. I'll get back with you in maybe 6 years.
Yeah, I know. Right. When they're all done. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So what's your greatest inspiration?
I am not the kind of person who's inspired very easily. I used to be, but I've gotten jaded the last 10 years. So my greatest inspiration is, this is a hard question, Doug. Like, this is where I wish you would prime me with some of these questions.
And that's why I love it. That's why I love it.
Okay.
I mean, I will tell you that Reese asked me for a list of questions, and I said I don't do questions. I don't do questions before because I just want it to be a conversation. So if we don't end up with anything, then we're good,
I get inspired by seeing stories told really well that move me. And I'll give you an example. A couple years ago, we finished a TV series called 12 Monkeys. And I will say that no one should watch it right now because it is a science fiction show about a virus. But it's so much more than that. So in this example, and I've had this with movies, like Cloud Atlas is one movie that I can think of. I come away from them feeling inspired to try and be better at my craft and to try and do something with my life and with my work that moves people. And I will probably never reach those heights of a movie like Cloud Atlas or a TV show like 12 Monkeys or Person of Interest or Babylon 5. But when they're out there and someone writes a story that moves me that much, then I'm inspired.
Yeah, I like that. I think the being able to find those stories that actually resonate with you is I think that's a cool. Well, let me put it another way. I think some of us, I know I don't allow myself to get involved with those stories too much. Let me say it a different way. I'd like to be able to be inspired by those stories more than I am. I don't allow I have a little sense of ADD, so it kind of I get stuck in my own little. I can't sit through them, so that becomes a problem to actually hear them. So I think that's interesting that you're able to, like, I can't sit through, like, how people sit through and they sit through the whole, like a whole Netflix series, like that's like the whole season, like 5 seasons of this show that's on Netflix. I can't even start because I know I'll never finish it.
So what inspires you?
Yeah, what inspire uncommon success inspires me.
Okay.
So success of regular people succeeding inspires me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I like that one too.
Yeah. So people like, I mean, so Reese inspires me because she's a fighter. She was a bullied as a kid, and she's, knew she wasn't going to make it in a corporate world, knew she wasn't going to make it in a job. And she figured out how 15 or 20 years ago, how to start her own little business with her computer. And that, I mean, anyone who says that it can't be done, I mean, it's just, it drives me nuts. I mean, people who say they can't do something is what drives me nuts. And people who say I'm stuck in my own little world drive me nuts. And it's inspiring to me to see people who have figured out their own path, because ultimately we all have one path to navigate, and that's our own. And so we're going to either allow somebody to decide that path for us, or we're going to navigate it on our own. And I think, so it's people like you that inspire me, because you figured out your own path, and you figured out how to navigate those waters and how to make a life worth living.
Yeah, and kind of claiming your own path and saying, this might not be what the world thinks I should be doing, whatever the world means, but it's what I'm going to do. And
right. And I think
I'm good with that.
And now more than ever in 2020, that, especially now after coronavirus, now it's going to be even more important that every single human decides to claim their path. Because there's nobody out there that's going to be able to lead you down that path. I mean, we're all going to be protected at some level. I mean, the government's going to take care of us, and I get all that. I mean, that's all going to be okay. But in the end, for us to actually really navigate and actually succeed in life, it's claiming our own path.
Yeah, and maybe in that way, it's not so much that I'm saying, well, yay, Corona, but I always think, well, what are the things that change, and maybe in a good way? And maybe I think one of the potential positives to come of this, and I want to be careful here because I know a lot of people are really sensitive right now, but it's potentially a great disruptor to our systems, to us just relying on a system and thinking it's going to take care of us, to even just our conditioning, like it's a disruptor to our conditioning and everything you believed and grew up with. Mm-hmm. And I think just from disruption, it can be very traumatizing for people. Mm-hmm. It has been for me at various times in my life, but I do think from that, people can and do come out stronger. They come out more aware of themselves, what they will and won't stand for, what's okay with them in the world, what's okay for them in the world, what's not okay. And that's one of, I guess, the bright spots or the silver linings I see from everything that's going on right now.
Right. And I think I'm definitely not one who says, I'm definitely not a believer in everything that happens for a reason. I don't believe that. I actually don't believe it at all. And I will fight anyone who's, well,
yeah, I hear you.
It's a joke. It's a joke with my wife, because if somebody says it, like actually my wife actually was the first person who actually pushed back on that about 20 years ago. I said, well, everything happens for a reason, just because isn't that what everybody says? I mean, when something bad happens, well, everything happens for a reason. And she's like, well, why does there have to be a reason?
Right. And I think that also when we say that, like everything happens for a reason, in some ways it's a way of bypassing people's pain. Like, mm-hmm. I hate it when someone who has suffered a significant and great loss, mm-hmm. and if they're told something like everything happens for a reason, to me that just seems so dismissive of wherever they are in that moment and whatever they're experiencing. And no, yeah, I'm with you. I really don't like trite and cliched phrases and things that people throw out, or like prayers and positive support. It's like, are you just saying these kind of things to make yourself feel better?
Right.
How is that really being with that person where they are in that moment and just saying, I see you, mm-hmm. and I'll stand here with you wherever you are.
Or I'm so sorry. I mean, that's
right.
That's pretty...
Exactly. I'm so sorry is a very good, like, everyone listening can take that home and say, if something happens terrible to someone, I'm so sorry can be your catchphrase, and mm-hmm. just roll with that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then, but most of us, it's not enough. I mean, most of us will want to say, let me know if I can help you in any way. And it's like, well, okay, that's kind of trite too, because like the person doesn't even know what they need at that point. At some point they're going to need food. So if you could just bring them a meal and whatever, and saying I'm bringing, any gift to them without them
needing to decide.
Yeah, right. Is valuable.
I love that. Like, don't ask, do you need anything? Just walk over with the freaking casserole, or better yet, give them a gift card, and then they can have some autonomy and buy something that makes sense and that they want.
Right.
And if they have food allergies, like some of us do, then they can navigate that on their own terms.
They can do what they want. Yeah. Or call a family member and say, who would like to, there's all sorts of ways to be able to help them out. So, well, Reese, it's been an hour. I know I've appreciated your time, and I really enjoyed this conversation. I think I kind of told you what I thought your biography was a few minutes ago. You're an inspiration to me. I feel like being able to navigate your career path and make it your own is your true biography. Because I think if people actually understood that you hung your shingle like 15 years ago and said, this is what I'm going to do. I mean, I think way back then, people were like saying, Reese, you can't do this. I'm sure people said you need to get a job and that you can't make this work. And I think the fact that you've been now almost 20 years doing it, and there's really no reason that it can't keep going for another 20 as long as you want it to go is I think that's pretty cool. I mean, I really think that's kind of your to me, that's your story. I mean, there's probably lots way more to the story than that, but let's just keep it at that for now.
I will take that as a story, or as one of my stories. I like that a lot. Thanks, Doug.
Yeah.
This has been really fun talking with you.
Yeah, it has. We should do it again sometime, I think.
I know. Yeah, we can do it when we're not trying to be all polished and profesh for a podcast. There's 3 P's in a row for you.
I know, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Doug.
All right.